Today's the fourth anniversary of several reports I sent to the Texas Medical Board, originally identified as Texas Board of Medical Examiners. After my first effort to contact them, I was informed that the title had changed. It was now the Texas Medical Board, whereas before it was Texas Board of Medical Examiners. There was a website, it was 100% up and active, presenting itself as the Texas Board of Medical Examiners, that had an online form wherein one could submit information through the web portal to the Texas Board of Medical Examiners, and I did so. Then they referred me to the Texas Medical Board, and the website looked pretty much the same, except it had a different name. I contend something similar happened with the State Bar of Texas, that they were engaged in acts of fraud where they were just flipping names. They were just swapping out names on accounts in order to allow for some form of older obligation to lapse and or be recharacterized after they got in new blood and they got in new human capital to try to offset or cover up for accrued liabilities or defaults that had already been set up, including defaults connected to the credibility of those alleged to be practitioners of medicine and or those alleged to be in medical service roles in the state of Texas. I'm going to keep this brief. I will say that I've attempted to go through a formal court proceeding in regards to what ended up happening to me when I was kidnapped. And in the course of doing that, one of the things that became very noticeable immediately is that I had been strategically and specifically assigned twice to judges who were only assigned to my case, I understand, in order to create acts of securities fraud and to launder money and assets connected to my good faith efforts to engage the legal process for a number of very high level crimes for reasons that to this day do not make any conscionable or logical sense. The first time, the name of the judge was somebody that was a named litigant in the case. And the second time, the name of the judge was somebody who not only shared the same last name as a major securities broker that is at the heart of my investigation of securities fraud, but also happens to have the same name as a doctor who had previously had a major case concerning the Texas Board of Medical Examiners regarding licensing on exactly the anniversaries associated with my kidnapping. That magistrate judge refused to take herself off the case, even though there is a requirement under the federal rules of civil procedure for judges to engage in certain actions when it comes to disclosures about circumstances that may disqualify them. But the question I have is, why did these specific people insist, if they did not actually have the jurisdiction or the capacity to handle the claim or the effort itself, why did they insist on making sure it was their name that was on the completely inappropriate actions taken in regards to my consideration? This is exactly what happened at the hospital to begin with. They were mandated reporters of child abuse and fraud. They did nothing close to what they were mandated by law to do. And the very basic things they had to do by law to even provide medical services, they not only failed to do, they refused to do. And it carried on through the entire process to this day. The Texas Board of Medical Examiners, or rather the Texas Medical Board, was also within the last 4 years up for review before the Sunset Commission. The Texas legislature had a duty to address these factors. What they did not have a right to do was try to cover up through some sort of ceremonial performance in abuse of the Constitution. Changes to law that only serve to further perpetuate the scam associated with illegally diagnosing people with mental illness, including people that are attempting to report crime. Including people attempting to report crime involving illegal prescription of pharmaceuticals and or psychotropic medication. The state of Texas presumably just participated in a multi-state effort to get a very substantial monetary award for damages concerning the alleged opiate epidemic. I contend that it's one of the biggest acts of securities fraud that's ever happened, and it was intentionally engaged to cover up for other crimes, including high crimes involving members of alleged public office, who themselves would have at some point, if not are currently, licensed to presumably practice law in the state of Texas, which they maintained while they were presumably serving in the role of a government official. How many medical practitioners, or rather, how many credentials of medical practitioners, were used and abused in acts of securities fraud in order to misrepresent the actual terms of service of people allegedly performing government roles in the state of Texas, whether they're federal roles or state roles, in order to do anything but what they were required to do, which in this case was address allegations of fraud and child abuse that not only have been proven since, but have been compounded and allowed to be replicated. The original concerns regarding my efforts to file a case through the court are separate from the concerns that somebody, anybody, should be able to rightfully have when it comes to somebody challenging their mental competence merely because they're going to people whose job it was to assist with reporting child abuse if somebody was a witness to child abuse. That's really how simple it should have been. But apparently, the conspiracy to cover up for the manners in which child abuse is so rampantly engaged in the state of Texas and the means by how it's accomplished is so considerable that even somebody that's presumably a doctor, including a doctor of people that are experiencing significant trauma, including trauma that comes from being a witness to violence or being exposed to violence themselves, they just don't even do the damn job. And nobody held them accountable this entire time.